Jesus, I was supposed to take the shot and I actually really fell. When we think about our lives, we often view it as something that has a start, a middle, and the end, like a story. At the start, we're born into a family that we have no control over, but still get treated as this prized possession by other people surrounded by us. We get started with school, and then there's this clear trajectory of what the next thing is, which is to jump from one standard to the other. Life was relatively simple, there were no decisions to be made, and there was just not much to think about. And then we moved on to college, a phase that was advertised as an important passage in someone's career. But you still had a clear trajectory and a set of things to do, which was to score how much ever you could for each semester and move on to the next year. Life was again uncomplicated because most of the times you just hung out with your buddies for 9 hours a day, 5-6 days a week, shared meals and the holy water together, and collectively got into all sorts of trouble. And then before we knew it, life came to a pause. We graduated, and for the first time there wasn't a clear trajectory of what the next thing was. Responsibilities started to come, decisions were to be made, and the cost per decision was quite hefty. And eventually, I started to define and have my own opinions of what living a good life meant. As I approach my 25th birthday this month, I've been sort of trying to reconsider and relook what the definition of living a good life means to be now, and it's very different from what it was a couple of years ago. And so in this video, I want to talk about 3 things about how I would define a life well lived, and these principles I sort of intend to carry with me for the next 25 to 30 years of my life.
And that is, everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you.
Now, as I graduated from college, the definition of a good life was heavily based on what I was seeing on the internet. I mean, celebrities and social media influencers were all hanging out in boats and yachts throughout the year. They were on different continents across different times of the year, and people were getting married to this amazing partner who they were advertising to the world as, based on whom Titanic was written. And so these amazing things became my daily expectation of a good life, and anything below than that was suboptimal. And I guess I felt this pressure of having to come out as this person on the internet as a guy who's living the life, if you know what I mean. But that's not life. That's a highlight reel. And my definition of the good life meant to create as many of these highlight reels as possible and put it out on the internet. And deep down there was this intense fantasizing going on in my head where I was envisioning myself to reach this imaginary city that I had constructed in my head, where everything would just be about the boats and the yachts, and the skills that I was chasing and still am chasing to this day would just somehow work themselves into me. And so I waited and waited and waited as I fantasized for that magical ticket to present itself so that I could hop on board. But this city that I had constructed in my head, and perhaps maybe some of you might have had before or still have to this day, I don't think it exists. And the people that we think who live there, I don't think they believe it exists either. In fact, I feel like they live the farthest away from this place of fiction. Because just like us, they wake up all groggy, feeling unmotivated to start.
I've woken up feeling a sense of detachment from what I'm doing.
Yeah.
कि यार मुझे नहीं करना है.
Just like us, they don't feel like doing the things that they want to do.
I just didn't want to live anymore, and I had everything that a man could want. There wasn't nothing that I didn't have, but it meant nothing meant anything. I felt worthless.
Just like us, there are times where they absolutely hate their line of work. And just like us, they get 8 hours of sleep.
And so then on sleep, I get 8 hours of sleep, I prioritize it.
I know it sounds counterintuitive, but understanding this sort of changed me and rocked me, which led me to read more about how these people combat dips in motivation, which leads me to number 2.
The more I create my own struggle, the more I orchestrate it, the more I feel like it minimizes those other struggles in life.
I know that I said that this place that we all aspire to be is fiction and it doesn't exist, but I feel like some version of that can be simulated into our worlds, into our realities. My manager recently wrote something about this, and I don't think I had the words to put it any better, so I'm just going to read off of what she wrote. She calls this place a paradise and writes, Paradise is fiction, yes, but fiction can be just as powerful as reality. Powerful enough to transform the meaning of paradise into something that's been right in front of someone their whole lives. To turn the unattainable into something achievable. And so, keeping relativity at its core, paradise is essentially a place where peace meets pleasure. And just to add to that, I think the good life starts to present itself once we find that sweet spot between peace, pleasure, and struggle. Assuming that we get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, which I'm sure that we all do, we are left to play with the 12-13 hours that we have, which in other words mean that we have 12 to 13 hours to create our own struggle and find our peace and pleasure. And as you might have read from her piece, finding one's own paradise is very subjective to themselves. And I'm just going to talk about a few things that I aspire to have in my paradise. Struggling to get myself out of the couch and go hit the gym, developing a reading habit, getting better at Valorant, an FPS game that I've recently been obsessed with, and becoming the writer and storyteller that I want myself and for the world to see. Because at the core of it, there is significant amount of struggle to get my unmotivated ass to do these things, but on the days that I actually manage to do them, I find my peace and my pleasure. Because a good life isn't a series of days where everything went our way and fell into place, but it's more of a battle that we have with ourselves to push us to do the things that we kind of don't want to do, but deep down know that creating our struggles and getting ourselves to do these things will ultimately result in us finding our peace and our pleasure.
I sit down with them and I go, how's it going? They go, I think I'm gonna quit. I'm like, why? They're like, I'm not making an impact. I'm like, you've been here 8 months.
My final realization of the good life was me understanding that even the inconsequential and the seemingly unimportant things also actually matter. We all want to do high impact things and we all want to work on big projects, and the smaller ones, I mean, they kind of feel inconsequential and unimportant. Even in our routines, there's certain set of things that we prioritize, and then there's the monotonous work like washing the clothes or doing the dishes or sweeping the floor or just staring at a blank wall. All of these things kind of felt like an unimportant use of my time before, but now I realize that those are also an essential part of our routines, and routines are a part of the good life, and a good life encompasses both important and unimportant things. Because if you can find a way to do these things with some joy, of course without forgetting the fact that there's a time and place for everything, or if you can use it to free your mind so that the mind goes back to the drawing board to generate fresh ideas for your work life, that is actually a very good use of our time. I kind of look at this like food. There's basil leaves and mustard seeds that I have no idea what they do and why they are there to this day, but they somehow enhance our food and we don't fail to add them, do we? So go ahead, waste that 1 hour or do that chore or go clean your shelf, because at the end of it, you never know the fun you'll have or the ideas you'll generate at that time. And so this video is simply an unoriginal reminder that the good life doesn't necessarily mean the boats and the yachts, but also realizing that there is no imaginary city, finding the balance between struggle, peace, and pleasure, and doing the seemingly unimportant things on your daily routine. I'll catch you guys in the next one.